Reveal a natural, radiant glow with Taiso Tinted Moisturizing Serum. With skin-loving ingredients like hyaluronic acid, glycerin, and ceramides, this serum delivers long-lasting hydration, leaving skin feeling nourished and refreshed. 5 luminous shades provide a radiant hint of buildable color with a glowing, sheer finish that enhances your tone and texture. Gentle, all-mineral SPF 30 and antioxidants protect against UV and environmental damage. Experience skincare that hydrates, protects, and perfects with Taiso's Tinted Moisturizing Serum. Visit taisoskin.com for details. Are you interested in providing results-driven treatment services? Join a team of like-minded individuals who share your passion and support your success. With more than 1,000 franchised locations in 49 states, Massage Envy is not only the nation's #1 provider of massage services collectively across its franchise network, but also a national leader in skincare. Start or grow your career at a Massage Envy franchised location. Visit massageenvy.com/SDcareers for full details.
Hello and welcome to ASCP Esty Talk. I'm Ella Cressman, a licensed esthetician, pretty cool educator, and content contributor for Associated Skincare Professionals.
I'm Maggie Staszcuk, licensed esthetician and ASCP's program director.
So we have a shout out today. It's a shout out to Jasmine and all the students at the Skin Specialists in Fayetteville, North Carolina. So they listen to our podcast every week and then do an assignment, and today's the perfect opportunity for that.
So excited. Hey, Jasmine.
So it's a beautiful day, and the weather is perfect for a controversy.
Woo-hoo.
Are you excited for this one?
Yes.
It's kind of creepy what's going on because of how this came about. There have been recent developments regarding the FDA's requirements for chemical sunscreens and animal testing.
Oh,
Right?
yeah.
And it's kind of dizzying when we think about minerals are better, chemicals are better. This is bad for the reefs and the waterways and all these other things. But no, it's okay. Here's the thing. In February 2025, the FDA confirmed that certain chemical sunscreen ingredients, particularly those lacking sufficient safety data, would now require additional testing in order to achieve the GRACE, or generally recognized as safe and effective status. So what this means is, or what's going to come of this, is this testing may include in vivo, real life studies, which often involve animal testing, such as the developmental and reproductive toxicity tests and carcinogenicity studies. Means a lot, and especially now that we're like knocking on summer's door, and it's really easy just to grab that spray-on, easily covered SPF version. But this move has definitely sparked controversy, especially considering that many of these ingredients have been used for decades with really extensive real-world human data available. But critics argue that the FDA should prioritize the modern human-relevant testing methods over traditional animal testing. Pretty crazy.
Really crazy. You know, my automatic response to this is stick with your zinc.
Right. Stick with zinc for the face and easy, but let's be honest, it's not an easy application for all over your body,
True.
especially by yourself or in sand or in like where we're at, we have like dirt because you got to kind of reach those back places and then, you know, the wind blows or something. It's so much easier just spray it on. It's very interesting too, because while the FDA has announced plans to phase out animal testing altogether for certain drugs by incorporating new approach methodologies or NAMs like AI-based models or organ on a chip system, it's really unclear how or when these alternatives will be applied to the sunscreen ingredients. So another interesting fact is the classification of sunscreens as over-the-counter drugs in the US means that they have these more stringent testing requirements compared to other countries where sunscreens are regulated as cosmetics. So a drug versus a cosmetic. I don't know. That's good and that's bad because we're saying prove it. where a XYZ company, skincare company, they have to prove certain level of testing, the SPF, the coverage. So that's a good thing. But to put it in that classification means they're going to have these certain tests to prove that they're not toxic. What do you think?
I think this is a generalization, but European countries and sun exposure and bathing on the beach, I think, is much more accepted, if you will, compared to the US, where we are very anti-sun exposure and we are covering up. We have our hats, we have our SPF. You even see, people with their umbrellas. We have UPF clothing. And so culturally, there's a big difference. So for European countries to classify their sunscreens as a cosmetic, where we're classifying as a drug, makes sense to me. Not to mention a product that has an SPF label, we are impacting the sun's ability to absorb the UV rays. So of course it's a drug. And then to say, well, prove that it's effective in doing so, I guess makes sense. But I don't understand why we then have to go a step further and say, well, let's test on those little baby bunnies to make sure it's actually effective.
Or not toxic, that there's not reproductive issues. But the same isn't required of other ingredients that have potential controversy. So I guess let's watch it. Let's check it out. For sure, advocacy groups are really urging the FDA to reconsider these requirements for those poor little baby bunnies and to accept existing human data and other non-animal testing methods. So I don't know. I, for one, would rather. I have some people you could test it on. I have a list of names that you can test on humans, and let's see if this works. But this isn't really the only controversial topic in the skincare industry. I thought, if we're going to talk about this stuff, let's talk about some other ones. One, of course, that is riding on just the heels of that is animal testing and regulatory discrepancies. A lot of brands tout cruelty-free. But did you know that in other countries, let's say you're exporting this product, for example, China until recently, some of these do require animal testing for imported products.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's crazy to me. So I don't know. It's kind of interesting. And the brands that you align with, do they still keep the same practice in other countries?
Yeah. So what does that mean?
It means that let's say Ella Cressman Skincare created an amazing serum and we don't test on animals and it's definitely organic and it has all these ingredient benefits and it's amazing and it sells really well here. The brand grows really big and then I start to sell in another country, but that in order to import into that country, I have to show regulatory requirements. So every country has regulatory requirements. We hear that a lot when we talk about EU requirements or European standards. They have certain percentages and stuff. So when you're going through the regulatory process to import into another or export into another country, they look at your ingredient list, they look at your testing, your claims, your packaging. So sometimes you have to adjust that, whether it's a label or have a completely different packaging for other countries. That would mean Ella Cressman Skincare Magic Serum, not tested on animals, goes to, I don't know what, name a fake country. Insert that here. And they do require that. Then that means I can't export to that country.
Interesting.
I would think that most brands that do that would just stand on, we're not going to have that happen. But
yeah, I would hope, right? Yeah.
Something to consider.
Very interesting.
So let's talk about another one, the lack of FDA oversight for cosmetic claims. Here's the issue. Skincare, as we know, is often regulated as cosmetics and not drugs. So a lot of times marketing claims that they make can get away with a lot as long as they don't cross into structure or function language. So here's the controversy. Terms like anti-aging, clinically proven, dermatologist approved, these are vague and misleading, but they don't require proof. This is something that we have everywhere.
Yeah, clinically proven, dermatologist approved. I feel like certainly on over-the-counter products, you see that everywhere. Professional lines, maybe not so much. The term anti-aging, we use all the time. But what does that mean, quote unquote, anti-aging, right?
Right. And it's just a made-up term, a misleading term to say. And that's what the issue is we can't, there's a broad amount of claims that we cannot make. And that's why you see reduces the appearance of instead of reduces wrinkles.
Uh-huh.
Because if we're saying reduces wrinkles, this is structure function language. So I would help write copy for a couple of brands, and it would get rejected sometimes because you can't say healing. That's a claim. So if you see healing on a package,
I'm going to go to the store and check this because
oh, she's going to the store.
I know I have seen healing and anti-aging, and it is going to erase those wrinkles from my forehead.
Yeah, I can't wait for the report. But it's the same, like dermatologist approved. Well, I mean, it's misleading because it's saying, oh, dermatologists are skin people. They know what they're talking about.
I was just going to say, you know what? If it's dermatologist approved, I'm not buying it. I want something that says esthetician approved.
Okay, let's start that. And we can because these are cosmetic claims. So that's awesome. How about this one? On that note, the over-medicalization of skincare. This is something happening, and I have a theory on it, but it's brands increasingly using clinical sounding language like prescription strength or dermaceutical or cosmaceutical.
Jinx.
Even when the product doesn't meet that threshold or there really isn't an honest definition of that. It's just marketing a little bit. So this blurs the line between aesthetic care and dermatological treatment or prescriptive treatments. And this causes clients to skip professional guidance maybe or overuse actives because they're in a big box store that says, medically inspired.
I get swayed by those words too, and I know better.
So what do you think? Now we're talking about a big box store and somebody going in to pick out their own things. How about the clinical language in an aesthetic business?
I think that the consumer is like, there's a beeline to that.
There's a beeline to that. So if the consumer is in an aesthetic clinic and the esthetician is recommending it, more permissible than if they were in Ulta.
I think that if you are in a spa or an esthetician's clinic and you have quote unquote medical lines or medical leaning lines, the environment you're in sways your opinion. I'm more inclined to think I'm in an esthetician's practice and this quote unquote medical line is going to work better because my esthetician is retailing this to me. It may be no different than something from Ulta, which also has estheticians, which also sells professional lines. But because I am in something that appears more clinical, or this esthetician is solo, or she has a medical director, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. You know what's interesting is before the lines of medical aesthetics and aesthetic like spas were blurred, you know what we had back in the Wayback Machine that we had that implied this? Clinique.
Ah.
When you went to the Clinique counter with my mom in the late 80s, they were in medical or like lab coats.
Yeah, white lab coats.
White lab coats and Clinique. I mean, it's implying the name that this Clinique was more effective was the implication. So it just continues on now into Walgreens, CVS, that there's this different or whatever grocery store you go to that now that influence is infiltrating there. So I think there's some good over-the-counter products, but this over-medicalization brings us to the next one, which is the cosmaceutical loophole. So cosmaceutical, of course, is the marriage between cosmetic and pharmaceutical. Here's the issue. Products can act like drugs by stimulating collagen or reducing melanin distribution, but they're sold as cosmetics with limited safety oversight. This reminds me of the podcast we did on the potential of warning label in California for underage sale of actives. But because there's no legal definition of cosmaceutical, this really does make it a regulatory gray area, ripe for confusion, kind of along the lines for me as a medical esthetician.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
I totally agree. I think there's a lot of ingredients, almost all the ingredients that we're using as estheticians that are creating change in the skin. And especially when we are combining these ingredients that, especially estheticians that really understand their ingredients and the power of these ingredients, you can do marvelous things, but they're not classified as a drug. So Is that a loophole? Is it a misunderstanding of our industry by who? The FDA? Or what is that? I don't know.
I wonder if it's an ability to explain to consumers what we really do.
Mm-hmm.
Because we do combine ingredients and modalities.
Yeah.
And okay, listen, I got these new facial cupping things that I've been using on clients. Oh my gosh, crazy results. Adding in this modality of lymphatic drainage in a certain way. Everybody, and I'm obsessed with it now. I'm like, oh gosh, I'm pulling off of a lot of active treatments and incorporating this back in. Mind you, I just became a med spa, by the way. Cheers. But the opportunity for this modality, particularly in services, is also making changes. But how are we relaying? It's almost like we're saying, hey, look, we are cool. We're good. Not cool. We're good enough. We can be super effective. We use cosmaceutical grade ingredients where you're using cosmetic grade ingredients.
Yeah.
That was when I was in sales. That's how we sold it. These are cosmaceutical grade. They're a step up from anything your clients can get from other sources. So I think it's a way to explain that we use things in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
But that word or that term is now borrowed by everybody. Right?
Totally. Yeah. 100%.
You talked about ingredients. So how about this ingredient overload and skin barrier damage? So using more acids, more retinoids, more peels, more devices. Obviously, that's gained popularity. That using everything in your toolbox philosophy. I call it the smack it up, flip it, rub it down in a facial or treatment or whatever you want. But what's also happened is a rise in sensitized or inflamed skin. So at home, now we have at-home microneedling, we have at-home dermaplaning, we have at-home peels, and many consumers are unknowingly disrupting their barrier function. So what do you think about that controversy?
Well, I think we live in a world where we want immediate results. And we got to a point where we don't want to wait for that appointment. And if we can do it ourselves, even better.
Yep.
You know, I mean,
I'm fine with it.
plain and simple. And you're right. You know, we have people at home who don't understand why they should be getting this treatment in the first place. They just know they're seeing it on social media or it's the latest trend and they're getting good results when they have the treatment. But what's the why? And that's where the esthetician comes in to educate. And the esthetician understands the how and they understand the why. And maybe you can go to the store and get some version to do this at home, but really you're getting the best outcome and the best results if you can book that appointment and get it done professionally, because you're getting not just the service, but also the consultation. You're getting the post-care and the follow-up and all the things that go with it.
Yeah, because we're really talking about skin health. Like Lachelle said on that podcast a few months ago, we're doing skin health. So seeking the advice of an esthetician who can help lead you in some of these home treatments. Say what maybe you should do, maybe what you shouldn't do, maybe what you should leave to a pro versus some of the things you can achieve at home. So we've been talking a lot about terms. Let's talk about fear-based marketing versus ingredient skincare. So here's the issue. Clean beauty, that term, quote unquote, clean beauty often villainizes ingredients like parabens, silicones, or sulfates, right? Kind of conditioned to look for those and avoid those. Yet there's scientific consensus that there are generally considered safe of these malefic or thought to be malefic ingredients, and that they are regulated at a certain level. So the fear-based narrative can lead to consumer confusion, over formulation, and neglect of more meaningful formulation concerns like pH balance or ingredient synergy. What do you think about that?
This takes me back to our original conversation about sunscreens. And I think there's a lot of misunderstanding, misconception about sunscreen versus sunblock, what's safe. You had mentioned protecting the reefs, and fear-based marketing is one of those things, understanding the ingredient science. Protecting yourself from over sun exposure is important. And whether you're using a sunscreen or a sunblock, at the end of the day, either one is great, whatever works best for you, whatever you have access to. I think it comes down to being sure you are just protecting yourself from over UV exposure.
Oh my gosh. So there was this, I agree with you wholeheartedly because I think some things can be misunderstood. A couple years ago, we gave an analogy of putting a little bit of salt in a chocolate cake. And what was the function of that salt in the cake is to enhance flavor, but it also has a chemical response. But it doesn't mean that you're at the risk of hypertension, like if you should be avoiding or having low salt foods. It's not the same as a bag of potato chips. And remember that analogy?
Yeah.
So I agree that it's not that these are horrible, awful all the time. It says you should be aware of how they work, where they are in the formula, and what they're supposed to do, not just write them all off. It's like saying you're dating and you're maybe looking on a dating app and you're just dismissing people because they're brunette.
Yeah.
Not all brunettes are bad. Maggie, the blonde.
Hey, I know a great brunette. She's sitting right in front of me.
I used to be blonde, half there. So interesting. Oh, I have to tell you guys about my social media. By the way, a challenge accepted from Maggie. I'm really trying hard. But one of the things that I touted recently was like, I don't do before and after pictures. I don't do it for a lot of reasons. But there's this one concern is the exploitation of the before and after images. And the issue is that there can be photo manipulation, lighting tricks, or inconsistent variables that can misrepresent results, like different angles and such. So the controversy is that this fuels false expectations on your social media. This is especially true for acne, hyperpigmentation, and even aging treatments. What do you think?
I think in today's world, it's hard to trust what you're seeing.
Yes.
You just said it. There's manipulation. And it's not just in skincare, it's in all things. So knowing, is this true? Am I going to get the results that I'm seeing in this photo? And it can be false marketing.
I wonder, does it set the expectation up for success as a practitioner? So working on hundreds of people, some results are slow, some results are fast, some results are digressive, some are progressive, goes up and down. But if you have a page full of these before and afters, and the metric is, I'm going to look for someone who has these kind of before and afters because that's what I want, but your lifestyle is completely different, and your skincare needs and your genetics and everything is completely different. Can you give them those same results? Are they going to be disappointed because they're not getting it fast enough? Right?
Yeah.
So all really interesting, lots of controversy. Thanks for playing. Now, listeners, we really want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on animal testing, over-medicalization, greenwashing, and all other controversial skincare topics? Reach out via Instagram, Facebook, or send us an email at getconnected@ascpskincare.com. We want to know all of the details. In the meantime, thank you for listening to ASCP Esty Talk. For more information on this episode or for ways to connect with Maggie or myself, or to learn more about ASCP, check out the show notes and stay tuned for the next episode of ASCP Esty Talk.
This podcast is sponsored by LAMPROBE. LAMPROBE is a popular aesthetic tool that enables skincare practitioners to rapidly treat a wide variety of common minor skin irregularities, or MSI. Red MSI treated by LAMPROBE include dilated capillaries and cherry angiomas, yellow MSI, cholesterol deposits and sebaceous hyperplasia, and brown MSI treated include skin tags and more. LAMPROBE MSI treatments are non-invasive and deliver immediate results. LAMPROBE can empower your skin practice with these new and highly in-demand services. For more information, visit lamprobe.com. That's LAMPROBE.com. And follow LAMPROBE on social media @LAMPROBE.